Friends, we are here once again with my good friend. He's your good friend. I shouldn't speak for him, but he's a really nice guy. The Solitary Adventurer. How are you doing today, sir? And where are you at?
I'm doing very well. I'm a little bit tired. I'm on the Isle of Man.
Isle of Man.
They're getting
Yes.
ready. Yeah, they're getting ready for the infamous TT motorcycle event. So
And
I've been driving. I've been driving the track a few times just to, feed the speed demon inside me.
we've had a few chats about that. I'm going on a bit of a crazy backwoods adventure. What we call up here side by sides, but I guess the proper term is a UTV or anyway.
Yeah.
There's these little buggies that are they just kind of and they're covered and they just rip through the backwoods there. It's amazing. But we're going on a long trek with some friends in Quebec, and it's going to be pretty cool. So will we run into some bears?
Envious.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't we get to some Patreon questions? Okay, we have some Patreon questions. Let's answer those. And sorry, folks. You know what I'm saying? Okay. All right, so let's see. Questions for Brian. How he thinks now, who asked this? How he
This
thinks,
is a question from me.
from you. Okay, yes, I thought.
Yeah.
Okay. How he thinks Prince would have played guitar. Is it an instinctual thing that he knows how to get the notes or he wants, or is it a complex process of musical theory? Oh my God, guys, I'm so sorry. When we say he plays guitar like it's an extension of himself, or he is at one with the guitar, what is that exactly? Okay. So I think it's a combination of natural and theoretical. So obviously, if he's soloing over whatever it is, he would be able to look at the chord progression and put together the appropriate scales that he could use, that type of thing. But also he's played over them so naturally because he's been used to improvising and soloing. So I've watched. I have more reaction videos coming up with him, and I'm really watching his guitar playing. So it's a combination of both, and also playing guitar like it's an extension of himself. I mentioned this in a reaction video, but I had a fellow. What reaction video was that where I said, look, he was one with his guitar. And the guy said, well, you're pretty good on the guitar. You're not one with the guitar. It's like, not the way he was. To do the things he does, to play, to sound good, but it's the movement, it's the stage presence like he's doing. Now, most men aren't good multitaskers, okay? A lot of women would agree with that. I can tell you I'm a horrendous multitasker. But Prince, think of when he's on stage performing, all the things that he has to manage in his brain at that time. He's playing guitar, right? Sometimes when he's singing, he's playing little runs, little licks, chord changes. He was doing a thing where he, like, sometimes I get the songs mixed up, but I'm working on it. But he was doing this really funky 16th note strum pattern, talking to the audience. I'm like, oh my God, man! Like I would really struggle doing that. It would be hard for me to do that without screwing up. But he's commanding the audience. He's leading a band. He's commanding the band. He's telling people what to do and giving them cues. He's commanding the sound board engineers, the front of house engineers, saying, turn me up. He's giving them cues directly or indirectly, like, yeah, this has to go here. And he's moving around the stage, and his movement and everything, I can't even come close to what he does. With that sense, it's the overall, just the guitar is part of me, and I'm going to go out and then you got to look at the way he moves, his rhythm. I understand as he aged, he started to have some physical ailments. I think we can agree on that. But just his command of everything. Like for me, when I used to play, it was hard enough doing our own sound and having to play and sing in a 3-piece little regional band, like let alone being on stage in front of 15,000 people. So that's, and when he's at one with the instrument, he just flowed so naturally. Like, I've had my moments of flow and doing well on stage, but there's also moments where I'm really concentrating and thinking about what I'm doing. And, I want to do a video and I want to make it justice about how Prince humbles every other musician. I could list so many ways, but if we just look at it from that aspect, the multitasking, think about it. As a man, are you a good multitasker? Maybe you are. I'm a horrible multitasker.
I'm okay, to be honest.
Yeah. Remember when you're a kid, they always say that thing about patting your head and rubbing your stomach. I could do that as a kid, but I can't do it now. And when I do that, it makes me hungry. But that's what
I've got a little story to demonstrate that capacity for you. So this is probably my last Prince interaction story. I think I've run out by then.
Mm-hmm.
So it was during the 2007 run of shows at the London O2 Arena. And if you remember, the symbol was the shape of the stage design.
Yeah.
Well, the pointy bit, the arrow at the bottom, there were tables set up around that. And I don't know how, but we managed to somehow get seats on those tables. And it sounds great. It sounds like, that's where you want to be, the VIP type area. But we were right underneath the speakers and the sound was absolutely dreadful.
Mm-hmm.
But you were so close to the stage, it made up for the fact it was a poor audio experience. Now, I was with my sister-in-law, now sister-in-law, who at the time was, my brother's girlfriend. And she is a twin, an identical twin. And her sister was with us. And in the middle of playing his guitar, Prince sort of sees these two identical twins, nods while he's playing a guitar solo, and smiles as he walks along playing his guitar solo.
Yeah.
So at the very height of where you would expect him to be running a, like 100% CPU because he's solo together.
Hard drive's filling up. It's almost full.
Exactly. It's exactly the point where you would expect him to be maxed out capacity. No, he saw them, spotted them, acknowledged it, and carried on walking around the stage playing his guitar solo. Phenomenal.
Yeah. So, and that's what I mean too. He's just one with the instrument. Just, it's just a different level. And it took me a while, even as when I started doing these reaction videos to him, I started thinking, oh my God, I had no idea he was that good of a guitar player. But then as you go, again, this is a life study. This is a very interesting artist. We both talked about this, and I've said it, like, let's say, I don't want to insult any other band or musician, but let's say, someone gets into a new band. As a fan, what are you probably going to do? You're going to kind of research their back catalog, their videos. You're going to do a bit of research on the band, their history, where they're from. I think that's a natural human tendency. And but with Prince, so basically with just a typical band, right? You could probably learn pretty much the meat of what they're about within a week or two, probably. You listen to some interviews, go through the back catalog. With Prince, it's not like that. Everyone, just so you guys know, the Solitary Adventurer, he wrote up a cheat sheet for me to help me with the lineups, the names, and everything, because this is a complex study of a complex person, a complex musician. So I'm just saying he has a life study. It's not just somebody you learn about a week.
I got kind of cocky as well because I thought this will take 10 minutes. In the end, it took me about 90. Because every time I thought, okay, I think I've got every iteration.
Yeah.
Somebody else would pop to mind. And particularly around the mid 2000s, he seemed to have people in the band for maybe a year, or 6 months. And at some point I had to just ignore the people who were there for a week and did an album, and sort of stick to who was doing the live tours. But you're right. I mean, it's an immense amount of music. It's a complex sort of, it's not like Bon Jovi, right? Where, Richie Sambora leaves and then a new guitarist comes in and that's about the major change in a 35-year career.
Yeah.
With Prince, it's not only the music and the bands and the personnel, it's all the stuff he did other than music.
Yeah.
Where he was, this sort of artist that he was, the thinking enveloped everything. It was like a 360-degree approach to everything.
Yeah.
And when you start going down that rabbit hole, it really is the life study that you talk about, because you realize that, this man's intellect didn't stop with what he could do on an instrument. He wanted the whole thing. you know.
Exactly. And so we're going to keep going through the questions, but we're on to something here. I want to keep that flowing, but we've talked a lot about the revolution. So, maybe this time I won't get into that too much. We talked a lot about Wendy and some stuff and some previous conversations. Before we talk about any of the individual musicians, before we get into that, I'd like to get into some of that today. Why do you think it was that there was, a bit of a turnover with musicians? Do you think, again, being a musician, I have an interest in the backstage dynamics, if that isn't evident, but is it more of a factor of Prince, he didn't get bored with them, but he felt it was a time for change, and he's like, would sit down and say, okay, look, guys, thank you very much. I'm going to make some changes. I'll be in touch down the road. And he gets a new lineup, or do you think there's other, not to focus on negative, just things aren't working out with certain musicians, there's disputes, stress, drama, where he dismisses people, or is it just more of a, for the most part, is it more of a, is it more of an amicable thing, just saying, hey, I'm going to hire you, I don't know for how long, and let's ride it out, and if there's changes, it's nothing personal?
Yeah, so if you look at musicians like John Blackwell, Michael Bland, Sonny Thompson, they have an era and then they get brought back. It might be studio work, it might be live work. So I don't think it was necessarily a case of him falling out with people. I think, to be honest, that the term I would use is he was a sponge for technique, ability, what they could bring to the game musically. And I think certain players, maybe he absorbed everything that he thought he was going to get from them. And once that album or that era was kind of coming to a close, I mean, if you look at Prince as that 360-degree artist, there's the clothing, there's the haircut, there's the facial hair, that he can go from long hair with a goatee to, crop short, pixie cut, clean shaven.
Yeah.
And I think the band, to an extent, in some ways, can be part of that. I need a new look. I need the whole thing. So if you take that to its extreme, Third Eye Girl is no accident, right? That it's 3 female musicians with him. So I think at times it was the whole persona, and then other times I think maybe he learned as much as he was going to musically from some people, and the ones who he hadn't fully exhausted musically, who really were the best in the business, like John Blackwell, Michael Bland, Sonny T, they had longevity. And if they were Minneapolis based as well, it always helped, because he could call someone at 3 o'clock in the morning to come and put something on a track and they would be available.
Do you think Prince, to me, like, it's very clear to me that man marched to the beat of his own drummer. Like, nobody dictated to him how things were going to be. He had a strong personality. He was a musical genius and force. Do you think at all he kind of tried to keep with the times? Like, I only saw one reaction video where I kind of felt that a little bit. That was in 1992.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember saying in the reaction video, and I apologize, guys, I'm not the best with, I'm working on it, the names of songs. He had another guitar player with him who had the Ibanez Saber, the thin guitar. It was an RG540. But they had that guy come out and he started talking, just like, and that 91, 92 era, like the band.
Is he talking, or is he a really bad rapper?
It just sounded like that. It really timestamped to that early 90s.
Yeah,
that's the only time I got that vibe a little bit, that he was trying to keep with the times. I'm like, who the hell is this guy? Get him off stage. What's he doing here? So it's just kind of like, let's throw him in because it's the early 90s and people are doing that. I don't know.
Yeah, I think most fans would give you the same answer here. He certainly drove the fashion and the music throughout the 80s. He was probably the artist that every musician tried to copy in some way. I would imagine they all bought a Lindrum after When Doves Cry hit, and the whole 1999 album. But I think round about 88, 89, where rap, as it was called then, before it was termed hip hop, really started to dominate the charts and the youth. And I think the mixture of Prince suddenly approaching 30, and you've got a whole new form of music, I think it derailed some of his creativity. And managers have spoke to it in the past that he didn't really appreciate rap because nobody's playing any instruments. And here's this guy who's, virtuosic on most instruments that he touches.
Yeah.
And he sees this guy who's basically just singing over somebody else's musicianship. And he really didn't like that.
Yeah.
Ironically, if you actually listen to 93, 94, once he gets rid of Tony M, who I think is the guy with the Ibanez that you're referring to,
Yeah.
and sort of takes on the rap duties himself, Prince isn't actually a bad rapper. Like,
No.
he just treats it as another vocal performance.
Yeah.
And he's clever with his lyrics. It's not gangster rap. It's not that hardcore, Compton West Coast stuff. But he can spit a few bars, put it that way.
I think Mark asked, I don't know if it was Mark, we talked about this last week. Like, I've always been drawn to virtuoso type music. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have a problem with rap. I remember years ago, I gave this kid lessons and he said, well, I don't really want to play guitar. I want to learn rap. So we actually took some rap songs and I broke it down musically, what they're doing, how to be on time, how to, conveying the message of whatever it was, but, rapping in key and on time. And there's a bit more to it than people would think. We were doing this. We go to this place in this town, about 20 minutes from here, once in a while on a Friday night, and they have karaoke there. And this guy got up and he was trying to be funny. The guy actually had some vocal ability, but he tried to do Ice Ice Baby from Vanilla Ice. And I whispered over to my partner, I said, good luck with that, because the breathing and the timing, and it was just, it was an aberration. And I told her, I said, I knew it was going to happen because, it's funny to try and do Vanilla Ice, but to actually get those words out on time and keep track of your breathing. I said he's going to butcher it, and he sure he did. But anyway,
do you know? Well, just final thought on that. Prince's approach, because rap is basically taking somebody else's sample and looping it. He created his own samples and looped them. And instead of taking Clyde Stubblefeld's Funky Drummer like everybody did for 10 or 15 years.
Yeah,
I thought it was quite interesting that
I know the beat you're talking about. Public Enemy did that all the time.
Yeah. But I just love the fact that he was like, well, I'll just create my own loop that we rap over. Yeah. So even then he couldn't, put the instruments down. He had to still do what he does.
So here's another question. The 90s were an interesting time for Prince. We've talked about it, but I want to just ask you this question while it's in my head. Grunge music came along and it killed a lot of music, like a lot of the hard rock, the really popular hard rock, and even a lot of the like heavy metal, thrash metal bands. Like some of them went under because it just affected it. So some of these bands were playing to 10, 12,000 seat arenas. All of a sudden they're having a hard time filling up a club of 1,000 people or 800 people. Do you think grunge had any way, directly or indirectly? I know it's a kind of a crazy left field question. Do you think it had an indirect effect on Prince at all?
I'm sure it did in the way that anything that was popular, considering that he's not driving the zeitgeist anymore when you go into 1990. So we already know that he said he listened to nobody else. There was nobody else's music he listened to because he created so much his own. That's the official line. The unofficial line is everybody worked with him said he was voracious. He listened to everything that was on the charts. He decomposed it to try and work it out. Yeah. And I think if you look at the early 90s going into the mid 90s, what you see is a more masculine Prince. Mm-hmm. He's still a diminutive sized man, and he still dresses immaculately, with these custom made clothes. But you suddenly don't have a female dancer. You have 3 male dancers. And they're doing things that are, more hip hop influenced because, he's a black man and he wants to sort of retake the black audience who have claimed for a few years that, he's chased the whiter audience and the crossover appeal. But when you look at the guitar work that's coming in, I think that's more of the response to grunge, and suddenly the guitar was back in fashion, whereas
grunge. Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. So there's a lot of virtuoso guitar players. They struggled during that time because the guitar solo became not cool anymore. But
Yeah.
that's one of the things about Prince. When we talk about Prince, or I get comments about Prince, and some people say to me, well, why was he so good? Well, look at the guy. He could play in a funk band. He could play in a jazz band. He could play in a hard rock or a metal band. He could play in a progressive band. Like it's not many, there's some people out there that are good in different styles, but he could do it all for sure. But let's get back to some more Patreon. Those are
Okay.
Patreon. For you guys out there that are thinking about hopping over to the Patreon, we got a lot of extra stuff coming, more stuff coming. We like to do after show chats, group chats with all our Patreons. They're all welcome to join. All my material that can't go on YouTube, I just got notice of another upload. Well, yeah, so it's going to go over to but we have a lot of footage there that you don't normally see. We have a really good community, and Solitary Adventure can vouch for that. It's all positive, and it's really awesome. And it's growing. It's really starting to grow. For a cup of coffee a month, you can go over and check it out. Patreon, yes, you can play guitar. So let's go to our good friend Strawberry Mind. We refer to her as SM often, but Strawberry Mind, really a nice person, wonderful Patreon friend. Hey Brian, question. I think you have seen pretty much all of Prince band members. Which band of Prince's is your fave? Okay, so drummer. This is my order of drummers. Okay, Michael Bland, John Blackwell. It's neck and neck. I can't, and I can really tell the difference between the two of them. But they're both amazing. My next favorite drummer would be the drummer from Third Eye Girl. She'd be my next favorite. So on bass, I have to say I really like Rhonda Smith.
Mm-hmm.
She's awesome. She's the one that puts her feet up on everything.
Yeah. She's very chilled.
Yeah, when I was it the one on Ellen or whatever, like she was sitting on a couch, and I was like,
yeah,
I'm watching it, I'm like, what?
Do you think that's an appreciation of Prince's, knowing that he wore heels?
Yeah,
he probably thought, Rhonda would like a sit down for that performance.
But I would say she's my favorite bass player. Mm-hmm. So now, okay, I got to ask you this. I was asked the other day. We were watching some videos on some stuff on Prince, and
before you move on, what about keyboardist? Because then everything else is a little bit random. But
yeah, that's well, yeah. So, what is up with the dude who dresses up like a doctor?
Yeah, so I think originally he dressed like a convict, like a criminal. That sort of carrying around the ball and chain.
So he's like a pre-Slipknot guy. Okay.
Yeah, I think it was whatever the fancy dress shop had, and then they toured with Rick James, 79, 80 thereabouts, and Rick James had a section in his set where he dressed like a convict. So Prince very quickly went to the keyboardist and said, "Go find wherever second idea you had." So the guy went to the fancy dress store, and when he saw the doctor's scrubs, he thought, well, this would work, right? Because I can pick these up anywhere, and they look like they would be quite comfortable heat-wise when I'm on stage. Everybody else could be sweating, but I'm going to be quite comfortable.
Yeah.
And then it just held, and he got a good 10 years out of those that idea. He still dresses in them now. If you go and see the Revolution.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got some stuff coming for the Revolution that you and I talked about a month ago. We'll talk about that and maybe in the after show discussion, but
okay.
Okay, so now so for keyboard, Tommy Barbarella, that was the dude that I thought was a chick.
Lovely hair.
Awesome keyboardist. They're all good. I like that Renato Nito guy. He's pretty good. I really like his playing. So it's going to be between those two. Now this could change, but it's going to be between those two. Drums, it's definitely consistent. Michael Bland, John Blackwell. Sorry, see, too much caffeine, eh? Or the caffeine hasn't kicked in yet. Other guitar. I really like I like Donna Grantis from Third Eye Blind. I think I really like Third Eye
Third Eye
Blind.
Girl even.
Third Eye Girls. Oh my God, people are going to kill me in the comment section. Um, I can't believe I said that. I think yes, I think they all look awesome on stage, and as a, you know, I don't mean that in a male sexual oogling over them. I just mean that they look awesome on stage with Prince.
Yeah,
Third
they
Eye
did.
Girl, yeah. Third Eye Blind. Oh my God. Edit. Oh, anyway. But I like her, but I think probably my favorite from what I've seen is I believe it's Levi. He had the
Yes.
Ibanez 540, and I would probably say he's my favorite other guitar player in Prince's band. And as you mentioned, we have others. I would probably say Maceo Parker, but you know, now we've
Yeah.
seen somewhere he's got a bit of a horn section, so you know, we're getting into different trombone, backing vocals. You guys would want me to answer, but the dancers, I'm dancing something like I appreciate it. I appreciate the athletic ability. I'm not, you know, I'm not really a dance kind of guy, so I can't really answer that. But I appreciate, you know, as you know, I'll watch some of them and go, oh my God, like she works out, she's in good shape. Even back in the day with Prince, like long before 20, 30 years ago, like I could appreciate what he would do on stage. Go, man, like I remember watching Thieves in the Temple in like 1990 going, oh my
Yeah.
God, look at those moves he was doing. Dude's in shape. I remember thinking that. So
Just
that
to play the part of a super fan,
yeah.
you've done what we all would like to do, which is pick people from different eras and put them all together to create
Yeah.
some sort of a super band. Considering that we can't do that, is the one formation, one era that you think is the best? You know, where you just have to take the people as they were combined at that time.
Oh man. Okay. I got this. Um, oh, the NPG I think would be
So Bland, Sonny,
yeah,
Barbarella. Okay.
yeah, yeah. Mm, I sound like a
It's tough,
layman.
isn't it?
Yeah, and I will say like too, we did some reaction videos, something in the water and Let's Go Crazy with the Manchester shows. Like that was awesome. They were pretty good too. Like you know, I mean, with all due respect to Third Eye Girl.
Do you know,
Uh,
I put that in one of the comments that if your knowledge and your belief is that Prince was an 80s act and there's nothing really after the 80s, that dispel that immediately
yeah,
and just put on Something in the Water from Manchester with the Third Eye Girl, because
absolutely.
you know he was killing it right up until the end.
Wanda Manning was, you know, Wanda's a good friend,
Yeah.
and she's a Patreon and a absolutely sweet human being. Um, this is for you. I'd like to ask how many of Prince's bands did he see? He meaning you, from the Revolution to band with Barbarella to NPG.
Right, I'm going to get my cheat sheet now. So to make it easy,
You have a cheat sheet
uh,
for the shows you've seen. Okay.
I have to sort of reference back. So my first concert was only 1998. I mean, you know, I was too young to be going to concerts until probably about 95, and then the first one I could get to was 98.
Yeah.
So if you check your cheat sheet, everybody knows the 98 lineup. I saw the 2002 tour, the 2007, 2011 Hop Farm. So we're sort of getting into where Ida joins and John Blackwell.
Yep.
And then obviously Third Eye Girl and the extended NPG.
Yep.
Now, the reason why I've got my cheat sheet is I've seen a few bands after Prince passed. So I've seen a lot more of that mid-90s MPG. So Michael, Sonny, and Tommy with Morris Hayes, that sort of iteration. I've seen them a few times in the last few years. Now, they're not a perfect replication of where they were in the early 90s, but I've seen them. I've also seen F Deluxe, who are the Family, which is a side project of Prince's that includes Eric Leeds, Susanna Melvoin, Wendy's sister, St. Paul Peterson, who St. Paul is a tremendous musician. He plays everything in the room. and probably more than Prince, truthfully, because I think he can actually play wind instruments. So he's from a very musical family and a really lovely guy.
You mentioned that before. I remember you mentioning that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've seen quite a few of them courtesy of Celebration and going to Minneapolis and actually seeing some live gigs over there.
Yeah.
But I kind of sit where you sit in terms of my favorite. It's a toss up because the Third Eye Girl era, where I was and where I am in my life, made that whole time incredibly special.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed those gigs more than I did any other gigs.
Yeah.
But I think from a musicianship point of view, I'm kind of with you. I think that early incarnation of the MPG, I think Tommy Barbarella is absolutely the best keyboard player that that Prince ever had.
And that's a dude, not a chick, guys.
He still has the hair, incidentally, and he does an annual, what seems to be annual now, tribute to Prince, where he has a friend of his who's a local Minneapolis singer, Julius Collins, really good vocalist. They do this tribute, and Barbarella is basically the band leader at the piano. Now, there's a couple of clips on YouTube, and I would urge anyone to go find them. They perform under the name of "Love to the Nines," which is it's a song from about '93 on one of the albums. But Barbarella on piano is just untouchable. I mean, the guy is like classical good. So and also for me, being a piano player myself, I get that he can play the styles of everybody else, and it sort of comes into Prince territory then, right? He can play guitar in several styles. Well, Barbarella can play funk keyboard, rhythm and blues, whatever it might be. He can play it all.
When they did the Santana medley, his playing, and he was doing some tricky stuff there. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah. Oh, phenomenal band.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay, so moving along.
Okay.
Penelope Size. Okay, so Penelope Size, good friend again. She is a Patreon. I call her, or Patreoni. I'd love to know, of the 36 times the Solitary Adventurer saw Prince, which performances stand out? We kind of covered that, but if you want to if you had to pick one or two.
Yeah, we covered after shows that I enjoyed. But simply put, it's Montreux 2013.
Okay.
I mean, you get to see what I saw because the video is out there on YouTube. But Montreux is a very special place. You're surrounded by beautiful scenery in Switzerland. You've got the lake, you've got sunshine.
You got smoke on the water.
And it's it's a very special place. And then to be in a room with maybe 2,000 people, 3,000 people. Yeah. And you're throwing distance from Prince. We were probably 20 feet away for 2 days. Just fantastic.
So Mike Machete. So Mike is a Patreon. He's a friend, and he actually, we'll leave this. This is more for the Patreons, but he told us a really good story last week on our Patreon after show. He had a pretty cool thing of Prince memorabilia that he got from Prince and had an interaction from Prince, and he shared it with us last week. It was a great story on Patreon. Yep. We appreciate that very much, Mike. So he asked a really a layered question when he said, we talked about the first part last week. I'd be interested in Solitary Adventure's take on some of the favorite unreleased gems. And I said, okay, he mentioned a few. I think he mentioned Possessed, Wally, Adonis, and Bathsheba. Is that pronouncing properly?
Bathsheba, yeah.
Sheba, okay. My sister used to have a dog named Sheba, so it kind of confused me. Yep. The original version of Extra Lovable, etc., and how they stack up against the tracks that were released during those times.
Yes.
So these are your thoughts.
Yeah. So rather than sort of go into detail with these songs, because it just then becomes, sort of what would you take off an album? What would you replace? I think there's a common thread to a lot of these. The lyrics of those songs have something in them that's a little bit touchy. In one of them, rape is mentioned, and not in a sinister. Well, of course it's sinister, but I actually had a little think about this through the week. So if you give me 1 minute, I'm gonna draw an analogy.
Yeah, of course.
You're,
Yeah,
you love movies, I love movies.
very
And
much
I
so.
was watching Matt Damon get interviewed about The Departed. And somebody asked him, what's it like working with Jack Nicholson? And he said, it's the way that he goes above and beyond that made him special. So he said to the director, we had a very basic scene, just let the camera run and I'll give you 3 or 4 outs. So instead of just read the script, they wrap up, they go home for the day. He reads the script, does the scene as it's written, then he adds a line which changes the entire feel of the scene, makes it more sinister. And he says another line which makes it comedic in a sort of dark humor kind of way. And then he looks at the guy who he's not meant to look at on the page, and that gives another twist to the scene. And Matt Damon said, if you look at that, the editor and the director now have 4 ways that they can color the movie by choosing any one of these 4.
Yeah.
And that's the greatness of Jack Nicholson. Now, to bring it full circle, Prince would create a song that we know as 4 minutes 20 on the album. But in the studio, he would record like a 7-minute, 8-minute version. Now, that could be the version that goes to the clubs and is the dance mix. It could be edited down to the single, or it could be less edited down to be the album version. And I think that's what these lyrics were designed to do. He could say anything on the 8-minute version, but he would pick a point and edit and fade out to give that song its meaning. Now, there's some really dark lyrics that occur towards the end of some of these longer cuts. And because they're bootlegs, we have the 7-8 minute versions. But I don't think they ever would have made the album at that length. So these are great songs. The fans all love them. Extra Lovable, Lust You Always, all of these types of songs. But the truth is, I think the lyric was either a little bit too much, or he would have edited, and we would never have known that they could have been as dark as they were.
Well, you mentioned the R word, which is
Mm-hmm.
So we know that there's a very famous and extremely wealthy musician that has a staff that scours YouTube for anyone mentioning anything to do with. He was with a very famous band. He had a song called "End of the Innocence." I remember one time hearing it on the radio and listening to the lyrics, going, "What the hell is this?" To each their own. You guys give that song a listen and really listen to the lyrics, and you're kind of going, "What is this song about?" Anyway, but carrying on, yes, and again, that's one of the things for me. He had such a big backlog of with his songs and everything. And for me, it's the names. We're talking about. I'm going to share this with people on YouTube too. Where I'm hoping to have some people associated with Prince over the years, different people come on and do one of these, and I want to line up the timing when you can be there, because when it comes to certain technical things about guitar recording equipment, microphones, cool, but it's the names and the backlog of everything and the time frames, and I'm just like, oh my god. But I think that's part of why when you and I talk, it goes so well. Because we're looking at it from different points of view. So was there one more? Let's see. Strawberry Mind. Okay, yes. SM, we call her SM, really sweet individual, and she's a patron and a friend. She would like to know the Solitary Adventure's top 10 Prince songs.
Okay, now that's like asking what's your top 10 meals. It changes based on how hungry you are. So what I did as a bit of a compromise, what are the 10 things I would save in a fire, in case of a fire? Mm-hmm. Because I think
you only grab 10.
Well, I've got to limit myself. I've got 2 arms. I take about 500 things. Yeah. But I think that the problem with just picking songs is that I'm incredibly familiar with the released back catalogue. Yeah. And songs that are magical have kind of lost some of that fairy dust for me. And it's only when I see people like yourself react to them that maybe I sort of freshen up temporarily, and I can see it with clean eyes again. So the 10 things that I would save in a fire, and I'll go through these quickly. There's a rehearsal performance with Third Eye Girl of an Isaac Hayes written song called Sweet As She Is. It's absolutely the number one thing that I would go and save. There's a rehearsal from 1987 where Prince rehearses Adore, which is a song that we all love, but he didn't really do in full performance-wise. And the last couple of minutes of that were the swell of the chorus behind him and the saxophone solo that Eric Leeds does makes it an absolute must-save for me. Another rehearsal, 1984, he's teaching The Revolution, a song that will be given to his protege band, The Family, called Screams of Passion. And to hear him tell the band, go faster, don't press the keys so hard, you know, it's a masterclass in band leading, but it's also much better than the version that the protege band ended up doing. It's Prince. It's just phenomenal. There's a song that was released on the Purple Rain extended edition. It was kind of renamed to We Can Funk, but you can imagine what the original one was called with one letter difference. His vocal performance on that is just spellbinding, and the way that he builds the backing vocals. There's this unreleased song called Open Book, which might have been given to somebody to cover. But I think it's one of his most beautiful ballads and a really clever lyric as well. And then it starts to get into sort of, you know, if you could give me night 3 of Montreux, I'd take that and be happy for the rest of my life. The night that you did Stevie Wonder at Indigo that we talked about last time, a very special night. And then the one that I think we'd all take, that Manchester Academy gig that Let's Go Crazy comes from. I think I missed one, which is Power Fantastic, which is from the Sign of the Times Super Deluxe that was released posthumously last year, I think, or maybe the year before. And it has this 30 seconds on the beginning where all of the Revolution are dotted around his house because they can't all fit in the studio. So he has to speak to them through the headphones, and he says, you know, this is just the test take. There are no mistakes. Warm your instruments up, and then I'll say, shh, you bring it down, and then Lisa will start us off and just play what you feel. And to hear how at that time they're still a unit, but that's how it worked. I think it blew every fan away when that was released. You know, to hear, because we hear all these stories of, you know, he was petulant and he was a nightmare to work with, and he demanded perfection from certain aspects of the musicianship. But it's just a guy saying to his band, you know, there are no bad takes, just do what you. And I think when every fan heard that, it was like, I want whatever's behind that curtain. I want the full movie. I want 3 hours of that, please. You know, Godfather Part 1, 2, and 3. I want to see what that world is like.
Absolutely. Do you think he's ever really chewed out a musician on the side?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of bootlegs floating around where he almost gets into a fist fight with Miko Weaver, and I think they actually stepped outside at Paisley Park. But the problem is, you know, Prince is 5'3", and as scrappy as he might be, you know, fighting a 6-foot guy there's a reason why he had a 300-pound bodyguard at all times.
But you know what?
He made it, you know.
If you told me now, and this is kind of going out to our good friend Ed, if you told me now that he had a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, that wouldn't surprise me. If he just did a standing, jumped up and gave the guy a triangle choke, and like.
There was a reporter in '99, I think, a press conference, asked him who would win in a fight, you or Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
And quick as you like, Prince replied, well, Michael's a lover, not a fighter.
Yeah. I do remember that. Yes, for sure. So that was another great one. I think we'll wind that one down for this week. And we're going to go on to do our Patreon after show now. So guys, you know, the channel is growing. It's a great community. Join us on Patreon. Cup of coffee a month. Go to Yes You Can Play Guitar, Patreon, and join the community. It's all positive. It's awesome. We got a lot of extra features. Now we're going to go on and we're going to have some of our Patreons come on for the after show when they talk with us about all things, not just music, not just Prince. Sometimes we talk about UFOs, the best restaurants. We talk about all kinds of stuff. All right. So remember, guys, practice hard, but practice smart. We'll see you soon.